Good morning. Let's get straight to markets.
Take a look at the impact for the indices.
Factual. Succinct. All you need to know before your trading day starts. Subscribe to our newsletter, CNBC's Daily Open.
Welcome to Beyond the Valley, a CNBC tech podcast with Arjun Karpal and Tom Chitty.
Beyond the Valley.
Veldhoven is one of the world's most important towns, said no one about 30 years ago. But today it is. The Dutch suburb of Eindhoven is home to ASML, which produces the most advanced silicon chip-making machines. The semiconductor in your smartphone was very likely made using one of them. Add in Amsterdam, the European headquarters for many international companies, and the Netherlands has become an attractive place for startups and investors. In the fourth and last instalment of our look at Europe's leading tech hubs, we're joined by a member of the Dutch royal family, no less, to discuss the country's startup culture and how it's found itself in the eye of a geopolitical trade war.
Beyond the Valley.
Let me introduce our special guest who joins us from The Hague. He is Special Envoy of the Dutch startup accelerator Techleap, where he works to help local startups grow fast internationally by improving their access to capital, market, talent and technologies. He also happens to be fourth in line to the Dutch throne. His oldest brother is reigning Dutch King Willem-Alexander, and he is the third and youngest son of former Dutch Queen Beatrix. Prince Constantijn, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Valley. Are we okay to call you Constantijn? Is that all right?
Yeah, much preferred.
Okay. I just have a quick question. We'll get into the tech quickly, but do you find it a little strange that you straddle two very different worlds? One that is all about innovation and change, and another which is built on traditions that haven't changed for hundreds of years?
Well, that's a big assumption. I think to stay relevant as a monarchy, you also have to stay on top of the times. It's more subtle, maybe, but you have to always be sensitive to how times are moving. So yes, they are two different worlds, but they also support each other. So I think it's turned out to be quite helpful, opening doors. Many companies don't get the access that the larger corporates will get and the governments get. So providing a bit more support there can be quite helpful.
And Constantijn, I've asked all our guests in this mini-series the same question at the start, which is, out of all Europe's tech hubs, cities, countries, where would you rank the top three, and in what order would they be?
Europe, including the UK?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's obvious that London has done an amazing job in the last decade, 1.5 decades. So London would definitely be number one. I think if you then look per capita or size, Amsterdam is probably 2, and it's consistently in the genome rankings, beating Paris and Berlin, which is quite remarkable. I am a big fan of Stockholm, actually, and I'm very impressed by Estonia as a country coming out of communism, really leaping ahead with a per capita highest, I think, density of unicorns. Is really quite impressive what they've done.
Fantastic. Well, we haven't had Stockholm being selected, so that's nice.
Or Estonia.
Yeah, absolutely right. Constantijn, we've just got to do a little bit of housekeeping for our listeners. So if you haven't already, you can subscribe to the Beyond the Valley weekly newsletter. Head to cnbc.com/Beyond the Valley. Click on the subscribe button and you'll get a newsletter every Friday with all the best international tech stories from CNBC. And if you want to contact Arjun and I, or have a question about a past episode or this episode, then email us at beyondthevalley@cnbc.com. Before we get back to our main story, we've got to hear Arjun's stat of the week, which is
85 billion euros, Tom and Constantijn. Just keep that in your mind.
You like a game, don't you, Constantijn?
Yes, I love games. So if it's a 80 billion game, I'm even more interested.
Brilliant. All right. Constantijn, let's just start us off getting into the subject of the Dutch tech sector by asking, how is it doing?
It's actually doing really well. We ran the stats for last year and actually saw an enormous pickup of venture capital, especially beginning of this year, and a marked shift towards deep tech. So where fintech, like in most other countries, is stable or declining a bit, the investments are really going into areas like clean tech, semiconductors, and those domains, which is an interesting development because these are harder to invest categories, but are economically very interesting.
Let's talk about a bit more specifically about the sort of strengths of the Dutch tech sector. We in the UK, we've talked about fintech being a particularly strong area for UK tech. For the Dutch, obviously we've mentioned at the top ASML. But are there any other areas in tech which the Netherlands is particularly strong?
Yeah, payments. So if you look at fintech, payments with Adyen, of course, leading company, but also Molly, and there's a whole host of new payment company coming out of these basically the repeat entrepreneurs that are starting their own companies again. So payments definitely a strong area. Traditionally, health tech, everything in life science and health, but they follow a bit different model, whereby universities play a bigger role, and then you have exits to big pharma. So but that's been a strong category. Clean tech and energy always been relatively strong, and of course we have a lot of food tech. And in the south, mostly southeast of the country, we have semiconductors. So then that's integrated photonics, quantum computing, those kind of developments are pretty strong. So on the whole, you can say it's a very diverse ecosystem with some deeper pockets or deeper concentrations around semiconductors, and I would say payments. But basically, you'll find every category from travel tech to HR tech to whatever you want to look for.
Constantijn, through this series on Europe's tech hubs, we've been trying to explore, I guess, the strengths and weaknesses or areas of improvement for many of the countries in Europe we've been looking at. And you look at somewhere like the UK and London more specifically, the strong, I guess, financial services background, the sort of big capital pools. You think about France and the way the government's been very vocal in supporting that scene there, etc. For the Netherlands, what in particular are the country's strengths in terms of things like talent, things like the history in being able to have fostered over the past few years quite a prominent startup scene?
So it's a country that embraces entrepreneurship, which many countries don't. If you ask yourself, do you want your son or daughter to become an entrepreneur? In some countries, they'd say, no, I prefer you to be a notary or a lawyer, banker, or a doctor, mostly doctors, actually. And in the Netherlands, it's appreciated if you're an entrepreneur. So that's definitely a strength. And we've been the front runners in implementing the internet, and the .nl domain was in the beginning one of the largest domains in the world. So we've always been embracing new developments. Where the challenge comes is to turn those developments into scalable companies. So we were leading with companies like Booking.com and the whole e-commerce development in the 90s. There were a lot of Dutch companies. Most of them then failed because there was a lack of capital. And then every subsequent technology development like blockchain, again, many Dutch developers, the gaming industry, many Dutch developers now in AI as well. Where we are weaker is in turning those developments into really sizable companies. And that's partly due to a lack of capital. But that's now mostly, I would say, solved because there's international capital is flowing quite generously also to the Netherlands. But it's also in the ambition and drive of the entrepreneurs, because I think the Dutch love independence and autonomy. And once, of course, you bring in outside investors, once your company starts growing, you start to lose autonomy and freedom, and you have to start building structure and all that. So most of the Dutch entrepreneurs like like the independence and the freedom. They don't like building big companies, and that's something we're really kind of working at. Also because we're through the role models and the people that have been there. So now we do have a number of really sizable tech companies, and it's actually the people that come, the kind of the alumni of those companies that are leading a whole new wave of startups.
Yeah, I think that was going to ask, there have been some very notable successes out in the Netherlands. You mentioned Booking.com, ADN, of course, another one, ASML, very well known now as well. So what do you think is required for this mindset shift to happen where Dutch entrepreneurs start thinking, we can build a, $50, $100 billion company going forward and scale it globally?
Basically, it requires people with the experience that have done it, and then they will have to stay in the ecosystem. If they all go to Silicon Valley, then you lose that experience. So in part, it's people coming back. It's investors having the same kind of ambitions. In part, it's so what we're doing at Techleap is kind of creating that community so that you get many more confrontations between kind of the new, first-time entrepreneurs and those that have been there and the operators that have run large companies. And then if they kind of tell you this is normal, it's not like the exceptional, but actually this is why you are actually a growth company and why you're not just an SME, why you're actually in this business, then that becomes a norm. And it's a cultural shift, but it's a cultural shift that you can make within a generation. It's not something that is unsurmountable.
Constantijn, we've always seen Amsterdam as the sort of tech hub of the Netherlands, but as we mentioned at the top, Eindhoven, or at least the suburbs of Eindhoven, have seen some incredible companies come out of there. But is it quite fragmented, the areas of where tech is emerging within the country? Yeah,
you could call it fragmented or decentralized or whatever. It's actually with about 2,500 tech companies in Amsterdam. I would say Amsterdam is still by far the biggest hub for software. But then, within half an hour drive, you are in Utrecht or The Hague or Rotterdam, and then you have another few thousand companies. But in software, logistics, cybersecurity, and there it becomes in health tech, so it becomes already more techy. And then if you go another half an hour south, you're in Eindhoven, and then and there you have all the semiconductor, and those kind of companies. So on the whole, I mean, if you just take the Netherlands, it's about twice the size of Silicon Valley. It's twice or maybe three times the size of Greater LA. So all these hubs are pretty close. I mean, it's from Menlo Park to San Francisco is further away than from Rotterdam to Amsterdam, or from Amsterdam to Eindhoven. So all in all, it's actually quite a dense cluster of indeed very diverse sectors. But yeah, so it's not exactly the same. I mean, London has a big advantage of being a big urban area, surrounded also with Oxford, Cambridge, and a number of those companies. All in all, it's a really interesting cluster, which you don't really see in the rest of Europe. For instance, in Germany, Berlin is good in e-commerce and platforms, and Munich is good in deep tech, and then you have so it's also spread out through the country. But if you look at the geography, the Netherlands is the size of one state in Germany, and everything is there.
Constantijn, I've had the pleasure of traveling around the Netherlands from Amsterdam to Rotterdam to Schiedam to even Noordwijk, and it's a lovely place. It's very pleasant, the entire country, and it's had a reputation of being a good place to live. I have one of my good friends who lives and works out in the Netherlands as well. Is that luster still there in terms of the quality of life? There's lots of still questions over whether the visa scheme is potentially as competitive as other countries, whether the cost of rent in places like Amsterdam is too high, etc. So is the Amsterdam is the Netherlands even still a place that is still attracting foreign talent?
No, absolutely. And of course, well, the weather hasn't helped. If it goes on like this, we will be drowning soon. But I guess in the UK it's not been much better. But no, on the whole, it's still very good. Of course, there's been some discussions around expat support, fiscal support for expats, but that's now been stabilized, and I think even the new government is endorsing that. But we went through a bit of political turmoil, but political turmoil in the Netherlands is quite relative. I mean, parties change, but you always have coalition governments. So it's not like in the UK or France or the US where you have a total shift in the administration. So there's always more continuity. And I think the quality of life is really good in the Netherlands. The accessibility, you have from Schiphol, you have more direct flights than most other airports in Europe. And that really helps. So no, I think on the whole it's still a very good place to come and work. And it's actually, we see that in the tech sector, it's sometimes easier to attract foreign talent than domestic talent. And so it's been a real magnet for foreign talent, which is finds it relatively easy to establish itself in the Netherlands. And our concern is more, do we get enough reskilling of existing talent in the Netherlands to fill all the vacancies?
Ambition to me is about doing better.
I think ambition creates a pathway.
Best advice I can give someone starting off a career is don't have a career, have lots of careers, try loads of different things.
Talk to people and put your ambition out there.
I don't feel that I've hit peak ambition because it's a learning journey.
CNBC is where ambition meets opportunity. What does living ambitiously mean to you? Hear it from our CNBC anchors, reporters and global business leaders on CNBC.com.
Constantijn, in this series, we've talked, obviously, unsurprisingly, about AI a fair bit.
I know it's
I know it's a subject that you're keen to discuss as well. We've mentioned a lot about the regulation versus innovation, and that the EU seem to be quite tough on the regulation side. Is that a view that you also agree with?
Yeah, it's tough, and it's good at it. I think I'm sometimes a bit afraid that we are too good at regulating and not good enough at creating, and I think and stimulating. So we need I think a better balance there. And it sounds maybe a bit hard, but I think it's in the end it's a loser strategy to want to regulate yourself or regulate the competition. And I think you need to create your own companies and that set the norm. So I think a good example has been the AI regulation, where first it was very harsh until Germany and France both developed their own LLMs, the companies Mistral and Aleph Alpha, and then suddenly there was a shift in being more accommodating to AI companies, and that shows a bit that if you have skin in the game, if you have companies that are competing at a global level, you might actually want take a bit more balanced perspective than we did in the past.
And Constantijn, there is this view, Europe very much lost out in this sort of last wave of the internet, the search, social media, etc., to the big US tech giants. With the growth of some of these generative AI, LLMs and applications, is there a chance here for Europe to establish itself as a player, as a big leader, and also create these scalable companies we were talking about right at the top?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how long your time horizon is, but we have centuries ahead of us, so you can't say you lost the battle, but it's clear that the last 2 decades. We've consistently missed kind of a next tech paradigm. So we're still leading in telecoms, leading in mobile telephony, and then missing out on the internet and on the cloud, on mobile internet, and this has been, at some of these companies in the US have been accruing not only capital but also talent, and have been front runners in many of those developments. And if you look at who's now investing most in quantum technology, for instance, it's again Google, Microsoft, and yeah, they of course have an incredibly strong position to keep ahead of the game. On the other hand, TikTok came and took over from Facebook. You saw even in the social media domain where network functionality is really strong, it proved that you can actually that there is a lot of competition as well if you want to. I think there are many domains in Europe, or especially in climate tech, etc., where Europe and medtech, where Europe does have an edge, and there's no reason why we wouldn't be building leading companies. But in AI, where data is so critical and capital is so critical, and GPU capacity is scarce and mostly produced in the US. They have a very strong advantages over Europe, and Europe has to pick up the pace. And it's like you have to start sometimes, right? So now with Mistral and Aleph Alpha, we are in the game, and of course we shouldn't forget that in the UK, DeepMind is actually basically the Google development is a European development. So there's also some hopeful signals, but there again, DeepMind didn't manage to scale and had to exit to Google to become really influential. And we'll have to start building our own companies if we want to be competitive globally.
So, Constantijn, you mentioned Mistral AI, a French company, Aleph Alpha, a German company. And, as we look across this big wave of AI and foundational models, LLMs being developed now, the conversation seems to be centered around the UK, around Germany, around France. Where is the Netherlands in this conversation?
So the Netherlands doesn't have similar developments in LLM like in Germany and France. We do have a number of companies that are playing in the space, like Weaviate in vector databases, and then we have a lot of companies applying AI in healthcare and other parts of the AI value chain. But so it's like, I would say the Netherlands is like second tier player in Europe. So we're not leading in this space. But we have a lot of developers here, a very rich development community. We have, for instance, Google is moving a lot of its activities to the Netherlands. And it's a bit the same as I mentioned before. A lot of people are in the space. There's a lot of enthusiasm around the technology. But building big companies in this space is not easy. And because you require a lot of capital. And we don't have the domestic funds to be able to do that. So all the capital has to come from VC that is outside of the Netherlands.
Constantijn, I mentioned at the top that ASML is caught in a geopolitical trade war, seemingly. We're seeing tech increasingly become strategic in that way. How much is that a concern to you when it comes to innovation and how this tech is going to be used in the future?
Well, it's a concern because as a small country, you're always dependent on ecosystems, value chains, all that are beyond your borders. So we benefit a lot from open borders and free flow of capital, goods and services. If that's reduced, so if even governments start thinking only nationally, then it becomes really difficult to build big companies. So we're already talking about access to capital, but so if you are in a strategic domain in the Netherlands, like in semiconductors, then you'll be scrutinized and the investment will be scrutinized. So it will be very hard to get money that has any link with China, maybe even the Gulf. So it becomes harder to attract money. And there's some domestic funds, also government funds to step into that gap, but not enough. And so that's a challenge. Also, I think so. The opportunities are international. So if we're building, the companies that are in the clean energy space, you want to be able to export that to Asia, to the Middle East, to basically across the world. So if they start doing the same things that we're doing here, if everybody's kind of closing off their borders, then how can you grow? Then you can only be a big Chinese company or a big US company. And in Europe, we are still too fragmented because it's not easy to become a European company. You still have to deal with 27 borders.
And with the sort of increasing geopolitical nature of some of these industries, Europe has taken this sort of de-risking approach to China specifically. So there's the China piece of the puzzle. But interestingly, also, you've seen kind of this, certain tensions over technology with other places like the US and other countries when it comes to things like data or various other aspects as well. So does that just feed into your view here that sort of going forward, geopolitics potentially has the ability to stop certain tech companies in certain sectors from scaling globally?
Yeah, I mean the globalized world is becoming less globalized, and you have more weaponization of many of the assets that are say underlying assets to tech development. And yeah, it's going to be more difficult. On the other hand, I mean, many of these tensions existed. The US and Europe have different views on privacy and data. That has been the case for years, and we have been finding ways of improving, sometimes 2 steps forward, a step back, and we're kind of finding our way. And then it could help that we have common concerns with certain actors, and that would actually, you would expect us to come closer together and stand for certain values. I think it's been a bit disappointing in a sense that you would have expected Europe and the US act much more as partners and not being dictated unilaterally about how we should be dealing with China or other geographies.
Constantijn, we're going to wrap up soon, but I wanted to just ask you about Startup Fest Europe, which you helped put together. It's a 5-day festival in the Netherlands that sort of brings businesses, entrepreneurs together to discuss and network. When you talk to these young entrepreneurs, young people in tech, what's your impression from them about their concerns or how they see the world? Is it set up for them to thrive in their careers?
Well, it was Startup Fest was something we did like 8 years ago, and it was really to kickstart a lot of developments in the Netherlands. We tried to pull all these activities across the country together in some of the main sectors that we had considerable strength in. And from there on, we kind of developed Startup Delta and Techleap, the organization I'm running currently, and we are in many conversations with startups. And yeah, I think it's a very there's a welcoming atmosphere. Of course, every entrepreneur will tell you how hard it is to start a business, especially to scale it. But in the meantime, there's been a lot of support for starting companies. You've got many incubators, co-work spaces, accelerators, you name it. And so we also, as Techleap, moved up a bit to the scaling phase, because we found that actually the challenges were not so much about starting a company, but it's about how to scale them. And there you'll hear that companies have more difficulties, especially around attracting talent and capital for that growth phase. And obviously, if you're a small country, you have to always think internationally. So you basically you don't have a domestic market really to play in. You have to actually go external. But the Netherlands is one of those kind of in-between countries. We have about 19 million people. So it's a considerable market, but it's and some companies tend to get stuck in the domestic market instead of thinking about how to go international early. But it's an additional challenge that you might have less in the UK or in Germany. Of course, there as well, companies have to go abroad, but they can still become quite profitable companies if they just stay within the local market.
Fantastic stuff, Constantijn. Before we let you go, we've got to do, of course, Stat of the Week, which, Arjun, you can remind our listeners.
85 billion euros. Constantijn, since you're our special guest, I'll give you the first go at this.
Is this a VC investment in AI startups?
No. It is to do with AI, Tom. Have you got a guess?
Your piece of paper with the answers right in front of me. I wasn't looking. So you okay? So is it the value of
the valuation of startups? not the investment.
It's not the valuation of startups. I've got a bit different with this one, slightly different.
No, so not the valuation of startup. No. Okay. Constantijn, back to you if you want to have another go, or should we let Arjun give us the answer?
You didn't give an answer yet, really.
Yeah, you didn't really.
Well, I was actually going to maybe focus on ASML, but then I realised it's probably about worth 250 billion or something like that. So that's nowhere near correct. So I will go with the valuations of startups.
It's not the valuation of startups.
It's the valuation of booking.com.
It might be. I haven't actually checked, but that's not the stat I've got. I'll give you the answer. It is how much generative AI could boost Dutch GDP by over 10 years if widespread adoption is achieved. That's according to Implement Consulting Group study commissioned by Google. So do take it with a pinch of salt. As I said, do take it with a pinch of salt since they are a big player in Gen AI.
8% GDP or something.
Something like that. And I think it's worth, that's obviously a very, very optimistic and rose-tinted view of it. But I think the conversation is valid in the sense that it'd be interesting to see what productivity, if any, is increased by AI, what it means, of course, for jobs, for reskilling, all of those conversations that are happening at the moment with this technology. Seems to be a whole nother episode, though, of course. We'll have to get you back on, Constantijn, for that one.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about that.
Brilliant. Well, that's it for this episode. Before we go, please follow and subscribe to the show, and you can rate us if you'd like. Constantijn, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you. It was great to be on your show.
Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you, Tom.
We'll be back next week for another episode of Beyond the Valley. Goodbye.
Beyond the Valley.